Therapy? Yes, I have been there, and boy oh boy did I love it. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Authentically Blue podcast. I am your host, Carlson, and in today's episode we have an Authentic Rumbles episode. In this episode I'm going to be talking all about therapy. Segments. An interesting thing that happened this week. I have two interesting things that happened. Firstly, oh my goodness, I read an amazing book that brought me back into reading. When I was younger, I used to read so many books. Just to give you context, when I was in primary school, we were only allowed to borrow 2 books a week. One English book and one Swahili book. Swahili is the national language. It's one of the national languages for Kenya, in case you didn't know. But the librarian would only allow people to read one English book and one Swahili book. I, on the other hand, had a very interesting intrigue with books, and the librarian allowed me to borrow 7 books a week. And when I tell you that I would finish the 7 books in less than a week and literally change those 7 books, that's how much I loved reading, just to give you context. And I continued that habit throughout the years, but then 5 years ago I stopped, mainly because I went to a new city. I was getting accustomed to it, learning different things, and I just kind of fell off it. But the past 3 years, I would say, like every time I travel back to Kenya, I would buy a book and read it. But mostly it would be autobiographies. I don't know, it just wasn't the same. I would read autobiographies, but not really novels or books I was interested in. I mentioned this in a previous episode, but I haven't been on TikTok till this year, August, and I discovered something called BookTok. Oh my goodness, it's literally, it's kind of like heaven. It's amazing how these people who recommend books, and it's like Goodreads, but it's so much better. And a friend of mine, her sister was reading novels too, and when I went to her place, I found a couple of books. A few books that stood out to me were the Colleen Hoover books. I've always seen people, mainly on Instagram, throughout the past few years, hype up her books. And I'm somebody personally, when the hype is really high, I don't engage in these things until the hype dies down. For some reason, I don't know, it just puts me off. And I didn't read any of her books, and I didn't have a high expectation. One of my friends had her book, it's called Verity. And I was like, let me give it a try. And I had that book in my room for over a week, and I just couldn't bring myself to read the book. But my goodness, when I started reading, I could not stop. I think I started reading the book at 11 p.m. and then I fell asleep, and I woke up in the morning and finished it in bed. That's how amazing that book was. And I was like, wow. It was hyped for a reason. But so I got back into reading. She's amazing. And secondly, the second interesting thing that happened, which is linked to this podcast, is I found out this week that my podcast was number 14 on the Kenyan charts for podcasting. And I was like, what? This is insane. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for all the love you show me, all the love for the podcast, you listening and enjoying. A little behind the scenes, because I looked at the analytics yesterday just to see what's happening, and my American people are actually ahead of the game at the moment. So shout out to all my listeners everywhere. I really appreciate you. What am I grateful for? This week specifically, I'm grateful for my health. I was sick for about 2 weeks, and prior to those 2 weeks, I was also sick for a little bit. Nothing serious, thankfully, but I'm someone who I rarely get sick, and when I do get sick, or even the flu, it really takes me down. And health is wealth, y'all. I've really been appreciating my health, getting back into my movement, being more active, and just functioning day to day. So appreciate your health while you have it. My word to the wise for this episode, I actually posted this quote on my Instagram story yesterday. I will link the page I got it from below because he does amazing reminders on life. The quote reads, "Your progress is not on a schedule. Your success is not on a time clock. Your healing is not based on speed, nor is your growth. You're not too late. You haven't missed it. There is no rush. Breathe. Remember to take in every moment along with your journey. Those moments matter too." Let's dive into the topic. A disclaimer before I begin. Everyone's experiences and thoughts in life are different, And it's very easy when a negative thought is planted in the mind. And if we sit with this feeling for too long, it can grow into narratives that are not true. Attacking these negative narratives and thoughts at the root is really important so it doesn't manifest into these negative narratives that end up ruling or destroying, that's kind of drastic, but affecting our lives in various ways and other people's lives around us. And the best way to do this is to be honest with yourself and have honest communications. Okay, now that I've done the disclaimer, I'm going to get to it. Why did I go to therapy? A couple of friends asked me how I got into it, why I did it, and all of that jazz. So I'm going to give a brief summary before I dive into a couple of experiences I learned while in therapy. I would say the main reason I went was because of grief. I was dealing with the grief of someone I loved and someone who was really close to me. And I found it really tricky moving on with life. So the main reason I went to therapy is because of my grief. It started there. My grief intertwined with so many aspects of my life, and me living alone at the time definitely did not help. It hit me in different stages, as it does everyone. Everyone's healing process is different, and healing is messy. This is something I've learned over and over and over again. But I was really overwhelmed, and I needed to try something new and different because what I was doing at the time was not working for me. And luckily, thankfully, I had resources for therapy. I had resources and was able to go to therapy. So I decided to go. Another reason as to why I went is because if you listen to my podcast all about manifestation and vision boarding, in my vision board a couple of years ago, I put down, I would love to go to therapy. And I just put down therapy and mental health because, as you all know, I'm really big on mental health. And I've always been interested in how the mind works. And I believe therapy is needed for everyone. Like, you don't need to go to therapy just because you've had a traumatic experience. There's so much you can learn. It's like physical health. You don't go to the gym to avoid sickness when your health is kind of impairing or realize like, oh, I'm not active enough right now. Or you don't go to the gym when your physical health is not at its best. You're supposed to be going to the gym regularly. You're supposed to be getting movement in regularly, and not only when your health is at risk, like either you have backaches or whatever your health situation is. You're supposed to be doing movement regularly for your own health. It's the same thing for mental health. You don't go when the house is on fire, you maintain it. Okay, what did I learn? Let's dive into it. Here are the things I learned in therapy. They are personal to me, but a few takeaways that may help you or give you the nudge you need to go to therapy. Or you may just need to hear this. And none of them are in order. So let's dive in. Number one, I would say boundaries. Boundaries with myself, boundaries with others. And I just really learned the importance of setting boundaries with myself because it's really easy to not do that or grow up not doing that. Number two, learning how to process my emotions. And I know it sounds obvious, but sometimes we all grow up with different experiences. We have different triggers. We have different ways we process our emotion. And sometimes they can be really unhealthy and you don't realize that or realize how your thought process affects different aspects of your life or how you behave in different situations. So me unpacking and learning how I process my emotions really helped me because I was personally dealing with a lot at the time. The reminder to be kind to me and give my feelings grace, because grief is one heck of a crazy thing. But even if you're not dealing with grief, just in general, giving yourself grace and reminding yourself that your feelings are valid. Also just noting the emotion you have and not necessarily dismissing or judging it. Like realizing, this is how I feel in this situation. Okay, why does it make me feel this way? What can I do differently? Just noting the emotion. You don't even have to work or unpack it, just realizing it. That's an important thing. Number three, all comes back to me, or you in this case. What do you want? How do you feel? What are you comfortable with? It all comes back to you. Number four, communication. The importance of honest and open communication with you. I mentioned this earlier on when I was talking about a negative thought manifesting. We are literally stuck with us forever. And if you're not honest with yourself, as hard as it may be, you're just making your life difficult for you. Number 5, finding you and being at peace with you. That is what life is really about. You are allowed to change and grow and evolve, or even stay the same. It's important to remind ourselves to go with the flow and just be. You don't have to compare yourself to other people. Don't get me wrong, I know how easy it is to compare yourself to other people at different stages. It's kind of how we were conditioned as humans. And I don't know, I guess it depends on the environment you're in, but go with the flow. Take it easy, one step at a time, one day at a time. It's on your schedule. No one's life is the same. And no one's life should be really, because that's what life is all about. Number 6, people's opinions or perception of you vary, and you cannot change it. I have talked about this point in a couple of episodes, so if you are a frequent listener, you know exactly what I mean. We cannot control other people's perception of us. I know that sounds very controlling, like wanting to control other people's perception of you. But sometimes when you love someone we genuinely want them to see us in a positive light. And sometimes when people are angry or upset or reveal how they truly feel about you in whatever situation, you may not like it. In my case personally, I've dealt with this, especially with loved ones, as I said. I mean, why would you care about other people's opinion? But you cannot control how people think of you, how they view you. All you can do is be the best version of you and keep it moving. Know who you are as a person. You have lived your whole life in your body, in your mind. I read an interesting quote on Pinterest the other day, and the quote read, "It's funny how we crumble at the words of people when they haven't lived a day in our shoes." I was talking to my cousin about this year, and I was saying how there was someone who had a certain perception of me, and I said, I haven't with this person in over 2 years, and they are stuck on who I was 2 years ago. And it's really frustrating, especially if it's someone who's in your life. It's frustrating, but you can't change other people's perception of you. That's the lesson. Number 7, check on me often. This is something that I did not do a lot prior to going to therapy, because I tend to give a lot of focus onto the people I love. That's just how I am naturally. Even in my friend groups, people tend to say I'm the mama bear. Like, I really care about other people. Like, if I love someone and if I care for them, I give them all my love. I know that sounds insane, but I just smother them with love. I care for them. I help them unpack their emotions. I'm there for them fully. And sometimes when I do that, I tend to forget to check in on me. So in therapy, this is an important thing I learned. If I neglect me, I can't care for the loved ones. That's kind of how I go about it, because that's how I am as a person. It kind of goes to the analogy on when you're in a plane and the plane is crashing. When you're on a plane and the plane is crashing, you need to put is it called the airbag? You need to put the air thing on you first before you put it on your kid or other people around you, just so that you're safe, and that way you can easily help other people. Number 8, give you grace. I talked about this a lot in this episode, in previous episodes. Just remember to give you grace. And this is something really, really hard. And I always remind my loved ones, whether it's my family members or my friends, I always remind them when they're in hard or tricky situations. I just tell them, give yourself grace. Don't beat yourself up too much. We're human. We make mistakes. We move, we evolve, we grow. That's just how we do it. And beating yourself up and making things is just making things difficult for you. It's not making anything any easier. And why live life that way anyway? Okay, number 9, healing is messy. I can shout this at the rooftops. Healing is so messy. Healing is not linear. There's a high chance of feeling guilty, of being triggered and being very uncomfortable while you're healing. But all of it is worth it, because why live in all that pain and misery and not being honest with yourself? It's all worth it. Trust me. And lastly, I would say, speaking to younger you. As I said earlier, none of this on the list is in order, but I think I would say this is one of the most important ones. Speaking to younger you. Be compassionate and caring to the younger version of you. This was the biggest one, as I just said. I know I'm saying it for the second time because I want it to sink in and for you to understand the magnitude of this one. I actually learned this on one of the last session I went for therapy, and my goodness, I had a lot to unpack. I had a lot to unpack the next couple of weeks at home, but being compassionate to you. When we are young, sometimes we carry trauma or wounds from our childhood and forget about them, or we don't even understand the root of where it comes from when we are older. Acknowledging younger you and giving yourself what you needed or what you may need, my goodness, is a game changer. For me personally, I think one insecurity that I realized, especially after this session, was my fear of abandonment. And it creeps in once in a while. In that therapy session I had, I vividly remember feeling this way due to having divorced parents and not being told what happened. I found myself living with my grandparents and never felt fully comfortable bringing it up or questioning what happened because no one explained it to me. But I felt this emotion a lot. I didn't understand how it manifested in different ways in my life. And don't get me wrong, I am grateful for the experience I had with my grandparents. Looking back now, I wouldn't trade any of my experiences at all because they've made me who I am, and I am strong and resilient because of it. But growing up, that idea of, they left with no reason. And I have had this conversation with my parents, so there's no hard feelings or anything, but I thought I should include it just to give you context as to what I learned because it's a vulnerable episode. But yeah, speaking to younger you and being compassionate to the younger version of you is really important. You can give yourself what you need. I literally sometimes when I'm going through something or something hits me the wrong way, I literally sit down and think, why am I feeling this way? And I try and unpack, and sometimes it doesn't come to me easily or naturally, but again, noting the emotion helps. Okay, we are all a work in progress. I love this amazing quote by Sophia Bush, one of my favorite actresses and podcaster. She has a podcast called Work in Progress. If you want to go check it out, it is amazing. But one of her quotes reads, "I can be a work in progress and a masterpiece simultaneously." That is literally my life motto. I love it. That is it for this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed listening to a couple of things I learned in therapy. If you are interested in going to therapy, I hope this episode is a push you needed or even a minor step in that direction. Hopefully it makes you feel less awkward about doing it or talking about it or telling someone you need help or just speaking to someone about something. Maybe share this with someone who you know may need it. Do research on ways you can access therapy near you and definitely give it a shot. I hope this episode was insightful and thank you for tuning in.